What was that? Mark chapter 2? Mark chapter 3? So it says, Mark chapter 2, 3. Jesus went into the synagogue again and noticed a man with a deformed hand. Since it was the Sabbath, Jesus' enemies watched him closely. If he healed the man's hand, they planned to accuse him of working on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the deformed hand, "Come and stand in front of everyone." Then he turned to his critics and asked, "Does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath? Or is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save life or to destroy it?" But they wouldn't answer him. He looked around at them angrily and was deep saddened by their hard hearts. Then he said to the man, "Hold out your hand." So the man held out his hand, and it was restored. At once the Pharisees went away and met with the supporters of Herod to plot how to kill Jesus. Large crowds followed Jesus in Matthew chapter 3, verse 7. And Jesus went out to the lake with his disciples, and a large crowd followed him. They came from all over Galilee, Judea, Jerusalem, and Idumea, from east of the Jordan River, even from as far north as Tyre and Sidon. The news about his miracles had spread far away, wide, and vast numbers of people came to see him. And Jesus instructed his disciples to have a boat ready, so the crowd would not crush him. He had healed many people that day, so all the sick people eagerly pushed forward to touch him. And whenever those possessed by evil spirits caught sight of him, the spirits would throw them to the ground in front of him, shrieking, "And you are the Son of God." But Jesus sternly commanded the spirits not to reveal who he was. So Jesus chose 12 disciples. Afterward, Jesus went up on the mountain and called out the ones he wanted to go with him, and they came to him. And then he appointed 12 of them and called them his apostles. They were accompanied to him, and he would send them out to preach the gospel, giving them authority to cast out demons. These are the 12 he chose: Simon, whom they named Peter, James and John, the son of Zebedee, but Jesus nicknamed them sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, and Simon and Judas Iscariot. One time, Jesus entered a house, and the crowds began to gather again, and soon he and his disciples couldn't even find time to eat. When his family heard what was happening, they tried to take him away. "He's out of his mind," they said. But the teachers of the religious law, who had arrived from Jerusalem, said, "He's possessed by Satan, the prince of demons. That's where he gets his power to cast out demons." Jesus called them over and responded with an illustration. "How can Satan cast out Satan?" he asked. "A kingdom divided by civil war will collapse. Similarly, a family splintered by feuding will fall apart. And if Satan is divided and fights against himself, how can he stand? How would never survive? He would never survive. Let me illustrate this further. Who is powerful enough to enter the house of a strong man and plunder his goods? Only someone even stronger. someone who could tie him up and then plunder his house. I tell you the truth, all sin and blasphemy can be forgiven, but anyone who blasphemes the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven, because they were using blasphemy, saying that he was possessed by a demon and all this crazy stuff. This is sin with eternal consequences. He told them this because they were saying he was possessed by an evil spirit, like I told y'all. Jesus described his true family. Then Jesus' mother and brothers came to see him, and they stood outside and sent word for him to come out and talk with them. There was a crowd sitting around Jesus Christ, and someone said, "Your mother and your brothers are outside asking for you." And Jesus replied, "Who is my mother? Who are my brothers?" Then he looked at those around him and said, "Look, these are my mothers and brothers. Anyone who does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." Okay, let's read the paragraphs to the Bible of the they have like a little study note thing.
Explaining key themes from the chapter. Here's a breakdown of the main points. 1. Jesus and the Sabbath. Mark 2:25-28 and Mark 3:1-6. The Pharisees accused Jesus and his disciples of breaking the Sabbath law by picking grain to eat. Jesus responded by pointing out how David also ate the sacred bread when he was in need. 1 Samuel 21:1-6. The key lesson. The Sabbath was created for man's benefit, not as a burden. The religious leaders were so focused on legalism that they missed God's true intent, love and mercy. 2. Jesus' growing opposition. Mark 3:2-6. Jesus healed a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath, which angered the Pharisees. Instead of recognizing the miracle as a sign of God's power, they plotted to kill him. Their anger reveals how they valued their status and traditions over God's true purpose. They were jealous of Jesus' influence, miracles, and teachings. And 3. The religious leaders' hypocrisy. Mark 3:2-6. The Pharisees accused Jesus of wrongdoing, yet they themselves plotted to kill him, completely contradicting the laws they claimed to uphold. This shows how their focus had shifted from leading people to God to protecting their own power and authority. Now 4. Jesus' popularity and conflict. Mark 3:7-11. Despite opposition from religious leaders, Jesus' popularity grew. Large crowds followed him because of his healings and miracles. Even evil spirits recognized who he was, but they had no intention of following him in obedience. Key takeaways. Religious rules should never overshadow love, mercy, and God's true intent. Jealousy and pride blinded the Pharisees to the truth about Jesus. True faith is about transformation, not just outward religious practice. Would you like a deeper explanation of any specific part?